Welcome back to the Rooted Wild podcast. I'm your host, Katherine Winkles, a certified therapeutic recreation specialist. And this space exists to help you build a life that supports your nervous system through nature, movement, creativity, rest, and compassionate self-understanding. Today's episode is our season finale. And instead of teaching something entirely new, we're going to slow down and integrate what we've already explored. Because real healing doesn't happen through information alone. It happens through reflection, repetition, and learning how to listen to yourself with kindness. This episode is about coming home to yourself, especially if life has taught you to override your body, ignore your needs, or survive instead of feel safe. So wherever you are, walking, resting, commuting, or lying down, let's take a breath together and begin. Before we dive in, let's do a brief grounding check-in. You don't need to change anything, just notice. Take a slow inhale through your nose. And a longer exhale through your mouth. Again, inhale gently. And release. Now ask yourself silently, what does my body feel like right now? Where do I notice tension, ease, or neutrality? What do I need more of in this moment? Movement, rest, quiet, connection, warmth? There's no right answer, just awareness. This practice of noticing without fixing is something we've returned to again and again this season, because regulation begins with permission to feel what's real. Why integration matters. We live in a culture that pushes constant growth, productivity, and optimization, but healing doesn't work that way. Neuroscience tells us that the nervous system learns through safety, repetition, and embodied experience, not through pressure or force. And trauma-informed care reminds us that people heal best when they feel choice, autonomy, and agency rather than obligation. That's why this season hasn't been about rigid routines or doing wellness right. It's been about learning how to build a life that works with your nervous system instead of against it. Today we're going to revisit the core pillars of this season, not as a checklist, but as a compassionate framework you can carry forward. Pillar 1. Nature as regulation, not performance. We talked a lot this season about nature, not as fitness, productivity, or achievement, but as co-regulation. Research in environmental psychology shows that time in natural environments reduces cortisol, lowers heart rate and blood pressure, improves mood and attention, supports parasympathetic nervous system activation. But what matters most isn't how far you hike or how long you stay outside. It's whether your nervous system feels safer while you're there. Nature therapy works because natural patterns are rhythmic and predictable, sensory input is often softer and more varied, there's less social evaluation, and the body can orient outward instead of staying in threat mode. As we explored how nature doesn't have to be dramatic or remote, sitting near a window, watching trees sway, touching cold air on your face, listening to rain or birds, even standing barefoot on grass or stone. Nature isn't something you do, it's something you return to, especially when your system needs steadiness. Here's a reflection question to revisit as needed. What does accessible nature look like for you, right now in your current season of life? Pillar 2, play, creativity, and flow. We explored play and creativity not as luxuries, but as biological regulation tools. Flow theory tells us that when we're absorbed in an activity that feels meaningful and appropriately challenging, the prefrontal cortex quiets, stress hormones decrease, dopamine and endorphins increase, time distortion occurs, and the nervous system shifts towards regulation. This is why creative expression, art, music, movement, gardening, crafting, writing, feels restorative even when it takes energy. We also talked about how play restores agency, builds emotional flexibility, supports trauma recovery, and creates embodied joy instead of cognitive coping. But play doesn't need to be loud, social, or high energy. Play can look like coloring quietly, rocking in a chair, listening to music with your eyes closed, watching clouds, making soup slowly, rearranging objects, and walking without a destination. Play isn't about productivity. It's about permission. Now here's your reflection question. When was the last time you did something just because it felt good in your body, not because it was useful? Pillar 3, rest, leisure, and rewriting productivity. We spent time this season unpacking leisure competence, the ability to rest, engage in enjoyment, and participate meaningfully without guilt or collapse. Many of us were taught rest is earned, exhaustion equals worth, stillness equals laziness, and productivity equals safety. But nervous system science tells us chronic stress without recovery leads to immune dysregulation, hormonal imbalance, pain amplification, burnout, and reduced cognitive capacity. Rest isn't the absence of movement. It's the presence of restoration. And leisure isn't escape. It's regulation. Healthy leisure restores energy instead of draining it, supports identity beyond productivity, builds nervous system flexibility, and increases emotional resilience. We explored how rest can look like low-demand movement, passive sensory input, gentle social connection, quiet creativity, time in nature, even doing nothing on purpose. Here's another reflection question for you. What does rest actually restore for you? Energy, mood, pain, clarity, patience, safety? Pillar 4, pacing, capacity, and listening to your body. One of the most important themes this season has been capacity-based living. Instead of pushing until collapse and recovering after, pacing teaches us to notice early signs of fatigue, plan for variability, alternate exertion and recovery, stay within sustainable limits, and build trust with the body. This is especially essential for people living with chronic pain, chronic illness, neurodivergence, trauma, burnout, post-viral conditions, and mental health conditions. But honestly, pacing is useful for everyone because the nervous system isn't a machine. They're dynamic, adaptive systems that fluctuate based on sleep, stress, sensory input, hormones, weather, social demands, illness, and trauma triggers. Listening to your body doesn't mean giving up on growth. It means choosing growth that doesn't cost your health. Here's your next reflection question. What signals does your body give before exhaustion? And what would it look like to respond sooner instead of later? Pillar 5. Connection, safety, and self-compassion. We've returned again and again to this truth. Healing happens in safety, not pressure. Polyvagal theory shows us that the nervous system is constantly scanning for safety or threat. Regulation improves when we feel connected, supported, and understood. Self-compassion activates parasympathetic pathways, and unfortunately, shame and self-criticism increase stress responses. Which means how you talk to yourself matters. How you treat your limits matters. How much permission you give yourself to rest, feel, and adapt matters. Healing doesn't mean never struggling. It means knowing how to meet yourself during struggle. We practice gentle check-ins, grounding techniques, sensory regulation, compassionate self-talk, values-based living, and adaptive coping. Not to become perfect, but to become more supported inside yourself. Another reflection question for you. What tone does your inner voice use when you're struggling? What would it sound like if it were kind? Here's a simple integration framework you can carry forward. Instead of a long list of tools, I want to leave you with a simple 5-question framework you can return to anytime. What does my nervous system need right now? Stimulation or soothing? What does my body have capacity for today? Not yesterday, not tomorrow, today. What feels regulating rather than draining? What would gentle care look like instead of self-discipline? What's one small choice I can make that supports sustainability instead of survival? Healing isn't about changing everything at once. It's about building micro moments of safety again and again. Let's close with a short nervous system reset. If you can, place one hand on your chest and one on your abdomen. Inhale slowly through your nose. Pause. Then exhale longer than your inhale. Again. Inhale. Pause. exhale. Now gently scan your body. Is your jaw soft? Are your shoulders dropped? Is your breath low in your belly? And silently repeat, I am allowed to move at the pace of my nervous system. I am allowed to rest. I am allowed to listen to my body. Let those land however they land. As we close this season, I want to say this. If you've listened to even one episode and felt more understood, more resourced, or more connected to yourself, that matters. If you tried one grounding exercise, took one slower walk, rested one time without guilt, or paused before pushing, that counts. Healing isn't linear. Growth isn't loud. Progress isn't always visible, but safety compounds. Thank you for being here. Thank you for caring about your nervous system. Thank you for choosing gentleness in a world that often rewards exhaustion. In the next season, we'll continue exploring nervous system health, adaptive recreation, pain-informed wellness, trauma-sensitive movement, nature-based regulation, sustainable joy, creative resilience, and what it looks like to live well in a body that changes. If this episode resonated with you, save it for future grounding. Share it with someone who could use nervous system support. Leave a review to help this podcast reach others navigating pain, stress, or burnout. And visit www.rootedwildretreats.com for worksheets, pacing tools, and gentle wellness resources. Or engage with us on Instagram at rooted_wild_retreats to see what we're up to between seasons. Until then, may you rest when you need to rest, move when you need movement, and trust your body's wisdom even when it speaks softly. I'll see you in the next season. In the meantime, stay rooted, stay curious, and as always, stay wild.